When you hear the story of our featured guest today, I think your mind will be as blown away as mine has been in doing a little research into the background of Greg Nance. Now, I can give you a little teaser preview of what his life story is, since his website is gregrunsfar.com. And when it says Greg Runs Far, it is being quite literal. We'll get into that story, as well as what's motivated him to put in all of those miles here in the moments ahead, as we welcome in Greg Nance, ultra marathoner, and a man with a powerful story to share. Greg, it's good to see you. How are you?
Well, great to see you. Thank you for the invitation here.
And I should point out, for those of you who are listening to the podcast version or the radio version, when I say good to see you, Greg and I are doing what basically everybody in the world is doing this year, and that's talking through Zoom. So I can see him, and you can as well if you go to our website at bigimpactradio.com, where we will post the video. Having said all that, Greg, I hardly know where to start. We have such a story to unpack, and it's part recovery, it's part faith, it's part Forrest Gump, because running from coast to coast. So why don't you open the door for us into the story of Greg Nance and what it was that got you motivated to put on the shoes and run as much as you run?
Yeah, well, number one, I want to thank you for having me. This is a really, really amazing opportunity, and it is great to see you too, Bill. My story really begins on Little Bainbridge Island, which is my hometown, where I'm speaking to you from today. And this is a really special place. It's 6 miles west of Seattle, and it's an island filled with trees and beautiful trails and beach. And as a little guy, I loved the feeling of running. And I wasn't very quick on my feet, but I still just loved to get out there, go explore the forest around, go down to the beach, and just move. I played just about every sport growing up. Really loved baseball, football, basketball, soccer, rowing, boxing, you name it, I played it. And I wasn't that great at any of it, but I was usually the quickest guy on the team. So I tried to use my speed to my advantage. And there came a point where none of the teams really wanted me except the running team. And so I decided to follow the muse, go for it. And running was always something that I really, really enjoyed. And it became really a lifeline to me. For a number of years, I really lost my way. And I was drinking and using painkillers to try to get over the loss of my best friend and hero, my grandpa Charlie, and I wasn't able to cope with that in healthier ways. And using drugs and alcohol was certainly not the right way to approach that, but that's what I did. Running was really one of the key ingredients to getting back on my feet, literally, and moving forward and just making progress and trying to build the sort of life that I want to lead. And running has been there since I can remember, and I hope it's still a part of my life as far as I go.
The covering up or the deadening of intense trauma and pain takes so many different forms. And yet, as I see you in the video here, Greg, you're obviously much younger than I am, which leads me to believe then that the struggle with substances took its hold of you at a pretty early age. When did all of this happen in your lifespan?
Yeah, I was 16 years old. My granddad had a very debilitating stroke. And so one moment we're watching documentaries and talking about how to grip a curveball or screwball on the couch, messing around, having fun. And then the next moment, my granddad is wasting away. And that was age 16. And that's where kind of the troubles for me really began, all the way to age 23. And so, 7 years, most every day drunk or high or both. And only age 23 do I finally, for the 100th time, vowed I'll never drink again. And finally it stuck. And in part with the running piece that I referenced there, and in part with prayer. I mean, it's a miracle. I don't know how I really got started there. And the fact that I'm now 3,000 plus days into this journey, it's a miracle.
I want to take just a moment and specifically address listeners or audience members who have or perhaps are dealing with an addiction in themselves or perhaps in a loved one or somebody that they just care a lot about, because there's a temptation. And I've learned this over the years of working with, and Greg, you and I just met, so you don't know this about me, but I work with a lot of recovery programs to help them in their messaging and their fundraising, because they're really good at what they do to help with recovery, but maybe not quite as good at telling their story. So having said that, one of the things that I've really learned over the years is that family members or those in the surrounding circle of influence often feel completely helpless to try to step in and help the one who's struggling. And it often can become frustrating enough that they just say, I don't understand why you just don't stop doing it. And yeah. I'm wondering if in your journey, if those conversations happened and what it was like, or if there were other family members who came along and did what they could, but didn't know what to do.
Yeah. So number one, I tip my cap for your important work there, because so often folks trying to find the path feel alone and feel isolated. And it really comes down to messaging. How do you create an inclusive message to really empower folks on both sides of that coin? And so, yeah, I really appreciate your service there. I think it's really important, especially in this moment when so many folks have never needed help more than now. On my own path, I really try to live kind of two parallel lives. So on one side, I've always, I wanted to be successful. I've wanted to get a great job. I wanted to be the best student I could, the best athlete I could be. And then, I am dealing with this pain and this challenge, and I'm using to mask those feelings that I have. And really, I try to keep those two lives kind of separate, where I didn't want anyone in this world over here knowing about how I'm the state debate champ or this varsity letterman. That's just not my vibe here. And simultaneously, I can't let anyone on the debate team or on the baseball team know about this other world, because I'll get kicked off the team. I can't have that. So I never had an intervention. There was never a moment where my family is trying to be there, because I was not being honest. I wasn't being forthright about the struggles I had, and I was getting pretty good grades. I was doing pretty well in sports and in my activities. So you wouldn't really know, because I was very good at kind of covering my tracks. There were moments where mom says, hey, I remember my mom coming to my room once. It smells like a brewery in here. You've been drinking. And I was like, oh yeah, just had a couple, and lying to my mom, clearly I'd had more than a couple, and it did smell like a brewery in my room when she came in there. So, but my folks, see this kid that seems to be doing really well. So I never had quite that moment, but I still felt the isolation, and I still felt the shame looking in the mirror of, why can't I quit? I've said I'm going to quit 100 times. What's wrong with me? And that's the place where compassion goes such a long way. Self-compassion, having a little bit of patience and kindness toward yourself. And then if you've got someone in your life struggling, know that this is a really tough disease, and it's one that really grips you, and it waits for a moment of weakness to pounce. And you can be really strong 23 hours, 55 minutes in the day. And that one moment is when you relapse, when you crack open that next drink, or you flip the tab. And that stuff is so tough, and it's hard to understand that or appreciate that if you haven't been kind of on that journey yourself. But it is a tough one, and that's why I think compassion goes a really long way to bridging that gap.
Well, I really appreciate the way that you laid out the scope of what the issue looks like, because here we are talking in the age of the pandemic, which is accompanied by, for a lot of people, some stress and trauma, some economic trauma, health issues, and all of those things that research has already shown us in just these months of COVID, already shown us that people are suffering and turning to addictions in all forms to try to deaden the pain. So for you, when you finally had enough of having enough, why running? Why not another sport? You said you were very active. How did you happen to turn to long distance running? That seems, well, for me, of course, that seems like a completely foreign idea, but for you, why then? Or why that activity?
One of my main struggles that I deal with, I have a very kind of active mind, where my mind is usually racing, and sometimes it can be really hard to kind of just have peace of mind and find tranquility. Running is one of the things I do where my mind really slows down as my body speeds up. And it becomes this really kind of relaxing state, even when my heart's pumping and my lungs are desperate for oxygen, that's where my mind actually really slows. And so I find it really meditative. And so some people can sit in one place for 20 minutes or an hour meditating. I think that's crazy. Like I would way rather run 20 miles or 50 miles than sit in one place for 20 minutes meditating. Cause it really is a mobile meditation for me. The other reason is running is free. Like you basically need a pair of shoes, and some yahoos even run without shoes. But yeah, for me, I put on a pair of shoes and then you head out the door, and you're free. You can go in any direction you want, and you can spend as much time as you need out there. And so for me, I felt like I had nowhere else to go except strapping on the shoes and heading out. And so that was really just a beautiful moment getting out there, and I kind of followed the muse step by step.
Our guest here on The Big Impact is Greg Nance. His website, by the way, is gregrunsfar.com. So what does far look like? Well, Greg is currently planning a run across America, roughly about 3,000 miles. I joked in the introduction that some of his inspiration reminds us of Forrest Gump. This is on a much more real level, Greg, and you're doing this run across America for a specific reason. It's not just to run up the odometer on your personal body clock, but it's to kind of raise awareness about a number of issues and challenges in our culture today. Can you take us behind the scenes of a 3,000-mile run?
Absolutely. And yeah, Bill, as you put it, I'm on a mission. For 7 years, I struggled with alcohol and painkiller abuse, and I wasn't able to talk about it and to get help the way I needed because of the stigma around addiction. And this run is all about how do we better support those in need, and how do we get to the root causes? Because actually, once someone's suffering from addiction, it's really hard to deal with that. It's much easier to help folks at the mental health level so they avoid those challenges altogether. And those that are dealing with addiction now, how do we really get to the root causes to better support folks? And this run is a celebration of my 3,000th day of sobriety, and it's really it's a journey of showing how no matter where we live in this country or how much our paycheck is or what education we have, our faith, our skin color, whatever, we are actually unified in this challenge. 1 in 7 Americans, 40 million Americans are dealing with substance addiction issues. And that touches every single one of us. Our brother, a sister, a mom, a dad, a child, someone in our family or in our friend group is dealing with this, whether we know it or not. And this run is all about helping folks to get support they need and to be the supportive person to their family, friends, loved ones.
Now, for all of the skeptics in the audience out there who think that this is the first run you've ever tried and this is crazy and it's never going to work, let's kind of lay the resume together here in the running world of Greg Nance. Dude, you're elite when it comes to running. You didn't say it, I did. You've done ultra marathons. Could you kind of let everybody know what that looks like? And by the way, a regular marathon, you're going to run 26.2 miles. I get a little weary if I drive my car that far. What's an ultra marathon?
Yeah, so an ultra is any distance beyond that marathon. And my favorite ultras are either the 100 kilometers, like 62 miles, or the 100-mile. And for me, I love that distance because they're always in a beautiful place. You like a national park or like a scenic mountain range or like a desert. Some are really kind of like exotic and out off the beaten path. It's really beautiful. And then you get to go there with other yahoos. Everyone's got their story because who does this? Like, you have to have a screw loose to go run 100 miles. And we do. And it's a beautiful thing to bring those folks together. And it's really a race against yourself, which is the part I love most is, can I really push my body, my mind, my spirit, my soul 100 miles through this jungle? And you got to push one step at a time to make that happen. And for me, it's all about pushing past the possibility and it's pushing your limits to find the stronger version of yourself. And that for me is a metaphor of my recovery journey. Is every day I'm trying to get a little bit better, a little bit stronger, be a little closer to what God has intended for my path. And that's what keeps me out running these ultra marathons.
I would like right now everybody to kind of think about your own geographic location. For me, a 100-mile run from this studio would take me basically to downtown Detroit. I can't fathom doing it. So for you, Greg, when you embark on a journey like that, how do you break it up? How do you keep your mind and body in sync so that you, A, don't get distracted from a mental standpoint or fatigued? And how in the world do you train for something like that? Because I know, by the way, that that's far from the most grueling running schedule you've kept, and we'll get into that in a moment. But how do you begin even to put together the pieces to train for that?
Yeah, so it really is. It's simpler than it sounds. It's really all about routines and habits. And so when I first started running, I couldn't run a mile without being completely winded and having to stop running and like let me walk, or even just like put my hands on my knees and just like catch my breath. But by building a daily practice where you're out running, you slowly build and build and build, and every one of us is capable of more than we realize. And that's true of running a long distance. It's true of anything that you care about doing in your life. You can do it better if you focus on it, if you put a little bit more time into it, and if you learn how your body, how your mind reacts. And so I know that sounds simplistic, but like that's what it really is. And so for me, it's pushing a little bit further. It's finding challenges, signing up for them, and then training. And you make a ton of mistakes. It's really hard to run 100 miles, and you make a lot of mistakes.
You don't say.
As you do it. And the beauty is you make smarter mistakes the next time. And, I've done a bunch of these now over the last near decade, and I'm making smarter mistakes today than I did, 8-10 years ago. And the result of that is like, I'm now a stronger runner, and I'm a stronger version of myself.
What mistakes, by the way? What would be an example of a mistake other than I can't run anymore?
Yeah. So one rookie mistake that I've made many times is pacing. So I love going out hard because it feels good. If it's a cold day, you're warming up more quickly, but like that creates lactic acid. And in a 10-mile run, you can push through lactic acid, but in a 100-mile run, your legs are now seizing up and Charlie horsing by mile 50, and you've got a long way to go. So that's a classic mistake. Bonking, as runners call it, it's where you like run out of glycogen, you run out of active calories, and your body starts like kind of shutting down on you. Like you're not able to run. You'll be lucky to even keep walking. Not hydrating enough, not putting on sunscreen, not putting on sort of like lubricant where you can like chafe under your arms or chafe in your knees or on your groin. Those are extremely painful mistakes that you're going to make one time, because after that, you don't want to go down that road again.
Your body teaches you that this is something you'll pay attention to moving forward.
Exactly.
You mentioned these rookie mistakes or these things that you've learned a couple different times. Is there a psychological battle with knowing what you're supposed to do, but kind of fooling yourself into, I've been around for a while. I don't need to worry about that stuff. That's truly for beginners. I'm past that. And then, like you said, several miles in, you're like, I did it again. Darn.
So way more than I care to admit. Yes. Like, really, it comes down to like elite execution of the fundamentals is what makes an elite runner, an elite basketball player, elite football player. It's who does these basic things really, really well with 100% consistency. And I ignore that lesson at my peril. And I still go out too hard sometimes. I still I'm over drinking or under drinking, on the hydration level. Like there are a lot of little things that you still goof up. And it's really who does that checklist a little bit better, a little bit more consistent. That's the person who's going to get their best race and end up on the podium.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't already caught wind of the reality that Greg Nance likes to run long distances, are you ready for this one? I want you all to be sitting down. Although if you're listening to the podcast on the elliptical, that's okay. Don't sit down now. Greg did a marathon on 7 different continents in 7 days. 7 different continents, 7 marathons in 7 days. Greg, I can't begin to wrap my head around this accomplishment. So you got to set this up for us. What were you thinking? Why did you do it? And probably as important as anything, how did you pull it off?
Hey, the World Marathon Challenge, as we call it, was really the biggest, wildest dream I could come up with. I had heard this fellow in the British Special Forces had been the first to do it. Only 104 people had ever made it happen. I wanted to join this crew, and I realized that there are others of us that also aspire to this wild feat. And folks are going to basically rent a plane. It's going to take you around the world, and our job is straightforward. We get off the plane, strap on the shoes, go run a marathon. And it sounded so big, wild, crazy that I got to do it. Yeah, that's how my brain goes. And so, 2-year process training for this, getting logistics in order, getting the sponsorship to actually pay for this. It's an expensive endeavor, and getting the mind right, because it is a really big challenge. And one thing that is really tough about it is you were on an airplane for 23,000 miles. You're flying all the way around the world, and it's hard enough to run, even for experienced runners, running a marathon a day for a week. That's a lot of running. And then you factor in the fact that you're trying to sleep on an airplane. You're trying to, your body clock is way off. The climate differences. I mean, Antarctica is really freaking cold. You're running on ice. And then 10 hours later, you're running in Cape Town, South Africa, and it's the middle of summer there. So it's 100 plus degrees. You're broiling in the sun. It's like mentally, usually you train for a cold race or a hot race, not both like that, right? And this was really, really tough, especially because I didn't have my health the way I needed. At mile 20 in Antarctica, at the very beginning of this big week, my stomach isn't feeling right. And I really needed to relieve myself. But we have a drone flying overhead, which is like filming all this. And it's like, look, I'm not going to make the blooper reel with this silly drone. I got to just keep going. And I make it to the finish line, but I'm not feeling my best. That's not how you want to be going on marathon 1 of 7. And it ends up being some kind of stomach bug. And the next week is really the gut check of all gut checks for me as a runner, especially because I've raised sponsorship. I'm live, Instagramming from the start and finish lines of this thing. And I feel like death warmed over. And it's really, really tough. And really I had spoken like these elementary school classrooms online in the lead up to this. And there were a lot of dark moments, but all of the support, all of the encouragement kind of flooding in through Instagram, it really kind of kept me moving. Like all these little kiddos who I just told to follow your dreams, even when it gets tough, are now me that advice back. And it's like, look, I got to make it happen for this, third grader over there. I got to keep pushing.
So this journey of 7 marathons on 7 continents in 7 days began in Antarctica. You started north and worked your way south.
We started in Antarctica, and the logic there is everyone's got fresh legs. And so I'm realizing it was really hard for every one of us, and it could have been deadly hard if you're already exhausted and fatigued. So that was sort of a safety deal. And the weather in Antarctica it's subject to very rapid changes and kind of dangerously so. So if you start there, the clock begins when you fire the first starting pistol. And so the idea was, in case we have bad weather, we don't get delayed there later on in the race and then get stuck and miss our window. So that was the logic, and I'm glad our logistics crew pointed that out, because that made a big difference.
How many of you set out on that journey, and how many of you made it?
Yeah, so here's the amazing thing. The 40 of us set out, and everyone accomplished one of their goals. So a couple folks dropped from the marathon to a half marathon, though they still did it. They did a half marathon on 7 continents.
We call them lightweights.
No, I mean, nothing but respect. One of the ladies, she had a horrible fall in Antarctica where she was bruised like nothing I've ever seen, from hip up to shoulder, from the ice, falling on the ice. And I was afraid she had, this is a really serious thing. She's really cold and, hypothermic and all. She still managed to do a half marathon on all 7 continents. So I was blown away. And, I was the youngest guy to do this. Most folks have way more experience, have been, running longer than I've been alive kind of deal. And that experience pays off. When you've really been there and you've been through tough stuff, you have a little bit of confidence that's well earned over your career there. And I learned a lot. The best part about this is we were on an airplane all together. You meet all these amazing people who've just done incredible things in their life, with their adventures, with their service, with their faith. And made 39 lifelong friends there. So
Well,
it's a really cool deal.
Greg, what I'm picturing is this group of 40 elite athletes, and you're flying to the different continents where marching bands and a royal greeting awaits, and that the path that you're going to run is finally tightly groomed, and there's not a pebble on the journey. And now you're telling me that one of the ladies slipped and fell on ice because you're running on ice, and I'm thinking that does not sound at all like what I had in my mind. So how different was reality from what you kind of thought it might be?
Yeah, so I knew that there would be unforeseen. It's kind of like one of these expect the unexpected is part of how you approach any race. Though I had never had a debilitating stomach bug so early on in a challenge. Like I've dealt with my stomach hurts, but I'm pretty close to the finish line. Power through. It's all good. This was I'm in the first inning and this is already happening. Oh boy. So that was the thing. I mean, that for me dominated my experience without a doubt. I will say there were really amazing kind of fan participation. Most ultras, it's like watching paint dry. It's like the most boring sport around. But here, the way that the team organized it, we did loops primarily through cities. So Cape Town, it was a loop around the promenade, which is this beautiful oceanfront park. And you have the Indian and Southern Oceans right there. It's just wow, this is just incredible. And you have hundreds of people out clapping and cheering and just being really kind and sweet and supportive there. In Australia, in Perth, Australia, we had hundreds of people at the crack of dawn. It was 2 a.m. They are barbecuing, they're drinking beers, they're shouting and being revelrous for us. In Dubai, where we flew thereafter, another midnight race, but still lots of folks out being supportive. Madrid was around a racetrack, F1 racetrack, which is, if you've ever watched some NASCAR or F1, a lot of the turns they're banked so that the cars can stay safely on the track. Well, that's really good for a car going 150 miles an hour.
Not for a runner.
It's so tough as a runner because your quadriceps are on fire from running 5 marathons, and now all the weight is on your left quad, which was just on fire for all 26 miles for me. So, and that was Madrid is 25 degrees in this was February 2019, so it's cold. So yeah, basically every race has its own challenges, but it's all running the mile you're on. All you can do is knock out these steps on this mile, and then you're on to the next. And that sort of mentality really helped me when the going got really tough.
We are visiting with Greg Nance here on The Big Impact, his powerful story about running. Well, GregRunsFar.com is the website. And Greg runs far for a cause, is what he's preparing for right now, a 3,000-mile journey across America. I just have, Greg, one more question for you regarding the 7 marathons in 7 days on 7 continents. And by the way, for those of you who are with us on radio or in the video stream, if you missed that conversation, go back about 7 minutes. It's well worth it. But it just dawned on me, Greg, as you were kind of telling that story, that to get from one continent to another, not only did you have to take care of your body and hopefully not cramp up mid-flight and make sure your nutrition was what it was supposed to be and all that, try to sleep sitting up in hopefully first class, but probably not all the time. Did the airlines ever get behind schedule, ever delay a flight, ever lose your luggage? The things that happens to those of us who try to go on vacation once in a while. I can't imagine having to deal with those interruptions while you're also trying to piece together another marathon. So how was the actual logistical side of the journey?
Yeah, so luckily we had an incredible logistics team that was handling all of that kind of behind the scenes. So, they were it felt very smooth, at least from my vantage. And I know there was lots of bumps probably behind the scenes, but we had a team really working through all of that. We also traveled as a group on a chartered plane. So actually it was an airplane that would basically take off once we were all there. It would land and then quickly deboard us. We'd rush through passport customs check and then go do our thing. So it was really clockwork, optimized to go as fast as we could. We had one significant delay out of all of that, and it was in Santiago, Chile. So after we had done our marathon, we're actually trying to fly to Miami for marathon number 7. Clock is ticking. We've got like 18 hours to like fly there and then go do a marathon. And we're not able to get like our paperwork squared up. And like, I'm like, what in the world's going on here? Like, I'm looking at my watch. Everybody is, we don't want to say 7 marathons, 7 continents, 8 days. Like that doesn't have the same thing. I want to get this done. And that, luckily we had an amazing team though that was able to sort it. And we had these great pilots that were able to get us there safely each stop. So logistically, there was a ton of stuff happening in the background, and luckily a great team to handle it for.
Man, I could talk to you all day just about that particular endeavor, but in the closing moments that we have, I want to make sure we get back to the reason and the purpose that you're doing all of these things these days. I know you do a lot of training, a lot of motivating. I see that you have an interesting motivational phrase. It's okay to suck. It's not okay to skip. I kind of like that. As one who, on occasion, I'm going to set a little scene for you here. A couple of weeks ago, my 97-year-old father-in-law was staying here at our home with us, as he's still in good health, but can't really be left alone just in case he were to slip and fall. And he was staying with us for a couple of days. And we don't have a big house. We have a house, whatever. It's normal. I try to work out about 6 days a week in my own home gym, and I was having a lazy afternoon and didn't want to do it. And I look up, and my 97-year-old father-in-law with his walker is doing laps between the living room and the kitchen in our home. The whole lap is probably, I don't even know, I've never done it, probably a total of 20 yards, who knows. And he's going, and he's going, and he's going. After he does several of them, he stops and he says, well, I guess it's time to unwind. And by that, he means go in the other direction and do the same thing. And then I read your motto that it's okay to suck, but it's not okay to skip. And now I feel terrible that on that day, while I watched a 97-year-old man do laps in my home, I skipped. So, shame me if you must, but talk to us about what that motto means when it comes to training and discipline.
No, absolutely. And here's the deal: is all of us feel that way on occasion. It's like, I'm exhausted, or I want a day off. And sometimes that day off, that's what your body needs, or what the mind feels like. It's really about the second day. Like, pros never skip twice is sort of the second part of that, where it's okay. Actually, you miss a day, that's fine. Don't let that become a habit. Don't become the kind of person that just misses when you don't feel like it. For me, I have a habit. I'm my own toughest critic by far, and I used to, when I was getting into this, it's like, oh, that was a bad training run, or like that I wasn't on today, and I'd beat myself up. It's not about that though. It's really about stacking 1% advantages, 1%, 1%, 1%. And over the course of just a few weeks and months and years, you become a completely different athlete. You become a completely different leader. You become a completely different believer. Whatever it is that you're focused on, just 1% better every day, you become the best version of yourself pretty quickly. And it's all about that consistency though, because as soon as you break, if you break the habit, it falls away, all the progress you've worked so hard for. So for me, it is okay to suck. Some days I'm not very strong out there. I have a really rough day. My mind's all over the place. My body's not humming the way it usually does, but that's okay. I'm with it. And I have a little, I believe your environment's really important. Above my desk is a little 2-inch tall replica of Cal Ripken Jr., one of my favorite baseball players growing up. Cal never skipped, 2,631 consecutive games there. And that, for me growing up, I loved baseball, and this was a guy who never missed. And so for me, I'm not going to miss school. I'm not going to miss my work off the tee. I'm not going to miss batting practice or my time taking infield. And that's the sort of mentality I try to keep today. I think it applies to any walk of life.
Greg, it's a powerful lesson, and I'm glad you're able to share it along with those days when it didn't go perfectly. By the time you establish a brand, by the time you become a sponsored ultra marathoner, and by the time you do this sort of thing on a fairly regular basis, those of us on the periphery who can't relate to the discipline that it requires in the training, we we kind of think this all comes together pretty easily for you. So I do appreciate you sharing in there the difficulties that are part of the journey. And I don't want us to run out of time, though, before I let you take a moment to share, I think, the most important aspect of the entire story, from your addiction recovery to why you do what you do now. And your faith ties into that quite deeply. Would you mind sharing with us how your faith has helped you through a lot of different chapters in your life?
Absolutely. Faith has been something that's been just enormously important at each juncture. And from really, really struggling as a teenager into my early 20s, and one of the few kind of beacons of light for me were this wonderful church community I had in Chicago that were praying for me, that were rooting for me, that were there for me. And in the years to follow, I didn't have quite the same supportive community. I was kind of moving around more. I spent a number of years in China where it's very difficult to be a Christian. It's for underground churches. And faith was, it was very much me and my Bible, me and prayer as I was out running and thinking and connecting with God. And now being back in my hometown, Bainbridge Island, faith has been everything. Being able to start each day with a prayer, pray before meal, pray before bed, and to really reconnect there. I'm in a place where I'm trying to do some really big things that are scary, where I know I can't do this alone. I need the support of friends and family, and I need the support from God. I need clarity on this path. I need courage to walk that path. And that, for me, that's part of why I love taking these big challenges, because I know I can't do it alone. I need the strength that only my Creator can give me. And that has been really just beautiful. Like, even during this pandemic, it's a lot of really tough days for me, but I just remember, hey, I've got all that I need right here, and an attitude of gratitude, and just continue to bring honor and glory through like the life that we're living and the path that we're seeking to walk.
Oh, that's awesome. By the way, when is the 3,000 mile run across America?
We're aiming to start April 4th. All
right. So we've got till springtime. And for everybody who's hearing your story now, I hope that not only will they follow along your journey at gregrunsfar.com, but I would love to check back in with you at the conclusion of that, or I don't know, I guess maybe during the run, and see how it's going. Maybe you're halfway through. I don't know if you're coming to Michigan or how that journey takes you. I've never tried to draw the straight line across, but
I'll be just south of Detroit, and yeah, I'll need a pacer, Bill, so you have to get out there with me.
Your pace will slow considerably if I'm your pacer, but it would be so cool to be a part of you coming through and try to lend some enthusiasm to you. I can't thank you enough for taking some time to share the difficult part of your story, as well as the encouraging and motivating part of it. So keep running, man. Keep it going. And if we can in any way lend some help, please let us know. We'd be happy to bring you back on.
I so appreciate it, Bill, and I'm a big fan of your work with the Big Impact, and I look forward to staying in touch here. Thank you.